Hereby call the meeting for the Affordable Housing Trust of Harwich to order. And we'll just do a roll call of members present. To my left.
Judith Underwood.
To my right.
Lawrence Barofi.
Brendan Lowney.
And I'm Joe Powers, Chair, and Selectman Don Howell is unable to participate today, and we wish him continued success and a speedy recovery. First item on the agenda under new business is an update from me as Town Administrator on the Adult Shared Living of Harwich Incorporated project, Mr. Jeff Locantori and friends. And Jeff has advised us that he continues to make exceptional success in getting folks to donate good services and in kind to the benefit of the Adult Shared Living Group of Harwich. And on the town's end, we're expecting to hear in July more information from Coastal Engineering on the current contract that we have with them regarding site survey and materials related to 0 Oak Street, which is one of the parcels in the town's arsenal presently. Any other comments or anything from the board on that? Excuse me, on the trust from that? Old habits die hard. I work for a board.
No, but just congratulations. Keep at it. This is great.
Yeah, it sounds like you continue to make great progress, so keep doing that, and we'll meet up in the middle at some point once we hear from engineering. I will talk about it later, but I expect that we will continue our last Monday in the month meeting schedule, so we are on track to continue to meet throughout the summer. All right.
Excellent.
Next item on the agenda is a presentation from David Burney on a potential joint venture to develop affordable workforce housing. Mr. Burney and your colleague, if you want to come to the table. I will tell you that Mr. Burney is a Harwich resident. He had reached out to me last week and was interested in making a presentation to the Affordable Housing Trust, so I told him his timing was good. And we're now getting materials, thank you, that Mr. Burney and his colleagues can present to us. And then, sir, again, just for the record, if you could state your name, please.
Sure, Scott Butcher, in the name of
Scott.
Scott Butcher.
Yep. Thank you. So, gentlemen, Dave, if you want to introduce, or David, introduce yourself for the record, and then the floor is yours, gentlemen.
Great, thank you, Joe. For the record, my name is David Burney, Harwich resident, Scott Butcher, Chatham resident. And we're proposing a public-private partnership to build some affordable housing in Harwich. We've looked at many different properties, and we feel that the Marceline property would be a good fit for this. There's many steps before we finalize that. This is a bird's eye view, and there's a process of, we need to go through the zoning, the engineering, design, permitting, before we even get to construction. We believe, in the packet I gave you, which Scott will get into detail, we believe that a low-income housing tax credit program is the way to go. We think that it can suit the best interests of the town, the developers, the investors, and ultimately the future tenants. So with that, I'll turn it over to Scott for the details on Litec.
So we thought we would give you a low-income housing tax credit 101 course in 10 minutes. So I'll ask you to number the pages on this, because I'll skip a lot of pages just to get to the salient points.
Okay.
But as Dave said,
And we agree that first page is a cover page, which is not numbered, correct?
first page, cover page is number 1.
It is number 1, all right,
That's
thank
number
you.
one.
That's how I did it.
We are literally on the same page now, thank you.
Great. So when Dave brought this concept to me, I said, in my day job, my company's called Tax Incentive Finance, so we finance a lot of tax credit equity projects, whether it be affordable housing, renewable energy, historic rehabilitation, but affordable housing is a marketplace that we're very familiar with, and it's as Dave said, it's a true public-private partnership with the community, with the state, with the federal government, and with a for-profit developer. And the reason that's important is the tax credits can only go to a for-profit developer. They can't go to a government entity or a nonprofit. So just to kind of give you a quick snapshot of how these tax credits work and why they're so meaningful. It'll be very obvious to you in a minute why this program's so powerful. The first few pages are just some snapshots of some other affordable housing transactions that we've seen that are financed with tax credit equity. And most of these projects are very well thought through from a design development standpoint, and most all of them are long-term public-private partnerships with the communities that they're in. This program has been around for a long time. If you go to page 4, the federal government enacted this program back in 1986 to allow for this tax incentive to assist developers in how they finance these projects. It has overwhelming support in the House and the Senate and continues to get reenacted. If you go to page 5, you can see what the benefits are. You know, the IRS section that this tax credit applies to is Section 42, so you'll hear them referred to as Section 42 tax credits. But it's a long-term tax credit. It's a 10-year credit that investors want to invest in. And what I mean by that is the developer who earns the credits doesn't use them. They basically sell them to someone who can use them, and that's their investor partner, and that's how the tax credits get monetized. So most of these projects that we've worked on, they're socially conscious investments. They satisfy Community Reinvestment Act requirements. It boosts investor environmental social governance for investment performance. So it's a compelling reason to invest in these tax credit equity investments. If you skip maybe to page 8. These tax credits are very competitive. Okay, the federal government essentially awards each state a pool of these tax credits based on the state's population, and then the state would seek applications for the tax credits, and it's very competitive. There are certainly more applications for these types of tax credit awards than there are tax credits. And I gave you a brief summary. There's 2 types of credits. There's a 9% credit and a 4% credit, but for purposes of today's discussion, we'll just focus on the 9% credit. Let's go to page 9, the next page. So once a project gets an allocation, and that could take up to 2 years, you go through multiple application rounds to seek an allocation of these tax credits for your project. And you might have to go through 3 or 4 application cycles, which could take up to 2 years. The tax credit equity is essentially a financing component of the project, and you'll see that in a minute. And what it does to the investors, right, the investors who invest in these tax credits, they're looking at a long-term tax credit write-off, for lack of a better word. I think page 9's a good illustration of how this works and how I think I just described it. The federal government gives each state an allocation of credit. The tax credits then go to the state's housing authority, and the state housing authority kind of goes through this application process for developers like Dave and I to seek the tax credits. And then the transaction occurs in those little boxes down in the middle. That's where the project occurs. And then you see to the left, you'll see the corporate investors. Those are the investors that are essentially investing in the tax credits themselves. Page 11 kind of gives you a step-by-step summary of how these projects and how the tax credits are achieved and how they're applied for, received, and monetized. And then the next few pages are kind of where the rubber meets the road. If you look at page 12, that operating partnership That's the developer that's gotta be developing this project, should it happen. Then you're gonna have a tax credit investor, those are the green boxes in the far right, that invests in the tax credit transaction. And how they do that is, the tax credit investor actually owns 99% of the operating partnership. And the 1% managing member is the developer. So for 15 years, the tax credit equity investor owns the operating partnership that owns the real estate. And I think if you look at page 13, this is really the salient point. If you were to go out on the market today and develop a market rate project, you're gonna finance the project with equity and debt. The developer's gotta put in, anywhere between 30 to 40% of their own equity, and they're gonna get debt financing for the balance, okay? In a tax credit equity transaction, if you look on the right, the tax credit equity is a substantial component of the financing, which substantially reduces the amount of debt that you need to borrow to finance the project. I think if you leave with anything, it's that, all right? That's the power of a tax credit equity transaction. And just to kind of give you some simple math on page 14, if you have a $20 million development project, your land cost, let's say it's $1 million, you get some intangible costs of $750, you get your hard construction costs, soft costs, but in total you get a $20 million project. That's got to have eligible tax credit basis of about $18 million, $18,250, and on a 9% tax credit, it would generate $1,642,000 of tax credit per year for 10 years. That's $16,425,000. And when you monetize that, it's almost $15 million. So on a $20 million project, you're able to achieve $15 million of tax credit equity, which means you only have to borrow $4 to $5 million, which makes it a lot more financially feasible.
Can we ask questions, or?
You bet.
why don't- So are you talking about, so the operating partnership, is that for ownership, or can that be for a long-term lease?
So you could do a ground lease. The operating partnership can enter into a ground lease that's one mechanism. But I think,
Will the tax credits still work the same way?
yeah, it still works the same way. The ground lease is just another means of how you're financing the land, no different than a purchase.
But in a municipality, sometimes they don't necessarily want to lose the long-term site of ownership.
So here's what our thoughts were on that,
Yeah.
is the real public-private partnership in this exercise is, how does the town get access to the real estate? And how can the town own the real estate after the tax credit compliance period? So if we enter into an arrangement, whether it's a ground lease or not, and we work together to co-manage the property,
Yeah.
at the end of the tax credit compliance period, there can be a guaranteed purchase price of the completed project.
Okay.
At
Like
a
after 20 years or something?
It would be, the tax credit compliance period's 10 years. But, so by the time you commence construction, it would be about a 13-year period. And then after that 13 years is up, there's a put provision to put out the tax credit investor. So then the operating partnership, which was owned 99% by the investor, is now going to be owned 99% by the managing member, or I'll say collectively us. And there could be a definitive agreement where the town has the right to acquire the building at that discounted price. So if you just did some rough math, if you did a $20 million project and you had $5 million in debt, and after 13 years, that debt's got to amortize to, say, $3.5 million.
And depreciation, yeah.
You could purchase it really for what the debt is. So, but you couldn't, but the town, no government entity can get the tax credits. It has to be a for-profit developer.
Totally get that, yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
quirky aspect of it. And it's common, a lot of these projects are developed and then managed with, I'll say, a housing authority, where the housing authority is actively or co-managing the project, the leasing of the project with another property manager, because there's specific requirements to manage an affordable housing project to make sure that the tenants that are going in that comply with the affordable housing rules.
You should mention the percentages are different than 40B on your tenants, market and.
So ultimately, for these projects to work, they have to, you want them to be all affordable units. You can break it up 80-20, where you could have 20% of the units of, I'll say, workforce housing, and then you can have 80% of them affordable. And the more affordable they are, the more desirable your application is to the state, whether it's 30% of AMI or up to 80% of AMI.
Gonna be my next question, how do they judge them?
So if you go to the second to last page, I think it's page 21. This is the state's qualified allocation plan, meaning how they prioritize allocating these tax credits to projects. So the first one is they want to see priority given to areas of opportunity where communities haven't achieved their level of affordable housing stock. So in this case, that benchmark's 12%. So Harwich is under 12%. So you're going to get a check the box on that one, right? That your housing stock's not where the state thinks it needs to be, and your application would score well there. Barnstable County as a whole is designated as a difficult development area, as defined by HUD standards. So you got to check the box on that application. Evidence of local support's extremely important, where DHCD encourages municipalities, usually housing authorities, to team together with for-profit developers to move forward with projects like that, and they want to see the local support. So ideally you'd want to check the box there. What else? And if we were able to enter into a partnership, we'd score a little bit better, where there's a 10% set-aside, required set-aside of these tax credits that have to go to qualified nonprofit organizations. A housing authority would qualify for that. So those were a few of the boxes we thought we would check to elevate the application to the top of the pile, so to speak. And then the last page just talks about DHCD's fair housing guidelines and what they encourage or try to encourage. You know, you want to encourage equity, balance housing needs, promote housing choice, promote greater opportunities, reduce concentrations of poverty, and preserve and produce affordable housing choices. So there's all different levels of affordable housings within the average medium income, but most of these projects, from a tax credit equity perspective, most of the investors aren't going to look at a project that's, say, 50-50 or 80% market, 20% affordable. They want to see more affordable housing because it maximizes the amount of the tax credit. And most of these investors are social-oriented investors and want to invest in affordable housing. So Dave thought it'd be a good crash course just to tell you a little bit more about tax credit equity. It's what I do for a living, so hopefully I didn't breeze through it too quickly, but you have this in front of you, and I'm certainly available for questions at any time.
Sure, we're going to open it up in a moment. For the benefit of the trust, Mr. Burney, as a Harwich resident, was aware of the Affordable Housing Trust, so he reached out to me. And the agenda topic is not one that we're going to utilize today, meaning we're not going to use this conversation today to engage in a joint venture, but rather that was the language that he had requested. So it gives us flexibility for Mr. Butcher to give his presentation on the low-income housing trust credit, tax credits, as well as anything that Mr. Burney wants to offer or anything we want to ask. So at this point, I would open up for the trust to ask questions, and I think Judith, you've been doing a great job. You've got a bunch of good questions. So we're gonna wave our arms to make sure, yes, we may be on filming right now, but we're trying to get the lights to stay on.
Is this
All
how we
right,
get-
anyway, that didn't work. But we now have a great visual of us doing this.
Right?
So I'd open it up to the trust for any questions, both to Mr. Butcher and to Mr. Burney. Just knowing that the potential joint venture topic is one that would carry over several discussions. And as I said to Mr. Burney, will probably require some formal effort by the town through me as procurement officer. But I thought it was helpful to get the information, to have these discussions, because it's gonna tie nicely into what we're gonna take up next on our agenda. So having said all that, any questions, comments, anything from the trust? Judith?
So I know one question that will come up, just to understand more about the tax credit and the Massachusetts, the fair housing guidelines. So, as you probably know, well, throughout Massachusetts, but we have a severe workforce. We have severe shortage of any kind of affordable housing. And one thing that people are, would like to see is if some of whatever happens in that location can be carved out just for people that have been waiting for housing in this area. And I know sometimes that doesn't necessarily fit the state guidelines. Can you explain how that
So you-
works?
You couldn't give preference to Harwich residents, so
Or,
to speak.
or Barnstable County residents, or,
However,
because a lot of the,
Statewide?
it's statewide.
it's statewide.
But if you're managing the asset, like hypothetically, your housing authority co-manages it with another property manager, you're gonna have access to all the folks that are looking for affordable housing. So you're not necessarily giving them preference, but they might apply first because you already know who they are.
Oh, I honestly, I think if there were an application, there would be, 20,000 applications. I have no doubt about that, so.
You couldn't
Yeah.
discriminate from that perspective.
But you're never allowed to carve out a
If-
piece. Yeah,
I'll
sorry.
jump in on that. If we play by Massachusetts rules, we have to play by their laws too.
Correct.
So anybody in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts between P-town and North Adams can apply, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, that would be, shall I delicately say awkward to sell?
Hmm?
Awkward isn't the word to sell. I mean, the rationale is that we've reached a point now where we've used town money to get as far as we've gone. We could probably finance it with town money and not have to play by the state's rules and not have to play by the federal rules. We might have to play by some federal rules, but quite frankly, we could choose. We could pick and choose, but
You certainly
once,
could.
once we take this, the choice is out of our hands, am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And 15 years down the road, who manages it?
And once the compliance period's over and the tax credits are earned out,
Yep,
the tax credit investor exits the transaction. Then it would be a matter of coming up with an agreement between, I'll say us, as to, you would own it, you would get it back.
Oh, I understand only too well. Go ahead, do you have?
No, I think that's, yeah, and this is,
And another thing, oh, good, thank God.
Thank you.
Bill?
You came in, the lights came on.
Perfect timing.
that always
Let
happens.
there be light.
And the housing authority here exists, but at this technical level,
Yeah.
they don't exist. I mean, they're appointed people that are from the town of Harwich. They're not from Lowell or Boston or Worcester that has a whole paid housing authority. There's a couple of volunteers that don't know very much about anything.
Well, there's,
And
yeah.
I'm being I'm being polite.
No, there is a housing authority we share with Chatham. There's
Yeah.
2 full-time persons and then a few
They're not a
part-time
sophisticated
person.
housing authority. This is a
It's-
very sophisticated project. that
Yeah,
Would require staff.
Well, the project itself would not. That would be done collectively by, we would bring in another property manager that would operate the project jointly with your housing authority, so that they comply with the tax credit rules. So to eliminate that concern over whether or not the sophistication is there to manage it, they would manage the asset.
can I ask,
Go ahead.
and I don't know if this is a preliminary question, and maybe Larry, you know this, but if, or Joe, if we have X amount of acres and it's, can we allocate part of it to one type of project and, or does it all have to,
It depends on the size too.
Yep, you can do that.
they don't have to be separate deeds, in other words? Separate lots? Or
It depends on how you divide them up. It's just what they call the subdivision of land.
Okay. Thanks.
And what's the number that works for units? Is there a certain number that makes, you know,
You should definitely need some density
Yeah,
to
what's the
make it
density?
worthwhile. I'll use a round number of 100 units. You know, whether it's 85 or 104, but you want to have some density to make it attractive. That's what
85, 104, interesting numbers. How'd
Yeah.
you come up with the 104? Is it just
random.
Okay, okay, I didn't
I
know.
just
was
said
there
100, so, you
something I
know,
didn't know,
it's
okay.
what we can engineer in there. I mean, it's a
Gotcha.
long process that we're just beginning to start,
Yeah, no, I
right?
get it,
So
get it.
knowing what you can put on that parcel's gotta take some time in terms of zoning, design. You know, we'd wanna go at the design as a partnership to get everyone's input, to make sure it's designed properly, what you want, what we think it needs to have in terms of amenities.
And that initial funding would come from you as far as the
So
exploratory?
if we entered into an agreement, yeah, all the funding would have to come from us. We wouldn't expect you to fund any of it.
And, if you're looking at 100 units tops, you're looking, right now with the available acreage that's there, you're looking at certainly over 10 units an acre, 10 to 12 units an acre. And if you're looking at plus 100 units, that's looking at closer to 15 an acre, because you're gonna have to do other things with that land. So, that's gonna be not an easy sell. I mean, that is, a much higher density than the town of Harwich has developed at currently, or the town of Chatham. So the development down in Yarmouth on Route 28 is probably,
69
yeah,
units?
69 units, and that probably doesn't exceed 8 or 9, 10 units an acre,
I think it's 69.
somewhere in that vicinity. So you're looking at a pretty dense development out there.
Sure.
And
I mean, think of that footprint with another building, more or less,
Yeah.
those numbers.
so, we've had some
Yeah, it was 69.
We've had some developers that have come in with suggested higher developments, and they've had an awkward reception is a delicate way to put it. And, this is something that we have to sell to the town. That becomes an awfully difficult sell. Yep, go right ahead.
So as a Harwich resident, I think the attractiveness to this is the fact that there's no out-of-pocket money from the town.
There is none now either.
Oh, you had mentioned if you had to build something yourselves.
We can finance it on our own.
Finance it, okay. Then I guess they're even in that stance, but
Oh, we've got a significant amount of money in the bank. We paid cash for pretty close to 15 acres. The 15 acres in and of itself, we could sell tomorrow morning and make money. I mean, we're allowed to make money, so we
Sure.
can do it.
some of the other types of affordable housing with the, 20% is affordable, and that's another advantage to this, and this is flexible. as far as the town gets the building at the end. I think there's different advantages. Now, it's still, I understand it's a tough sell. I think all of this is a tough sell to the town.
Yeah, we didn't come today to sell it, we just came to
Yeah.
give you a little information about the ideas we had
That's
for it.
great.
So as a chair, I try to defer to the members, let them speak first, go through their questions. I also do that because I learn more when they talk and I listen. But I do have some questions of my own, but I wanted to start up where you left off. I don't look at this as a sales pitch. For me, this information's helpful. My first question is, it's helpful if my assumptions are correct. Could we look at the LITEC program or the mechanism or process as an opposite or as a different opportunity rather than 40B? Or is it?
No, 40B would be more for zoning, right? LITEC wouldn't.
This
do
just gets
anything.
to development, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
This program is just a financing mechanism where 40B's got to allow you to get the zoning you need.
Yeah, okay.
So ultimately, it would be a 40B.
You'd probably want to do it, from what
have
I
to be, right?
briefly
Zoning
looked at, you don't
requirements,
have the
though.
zoning to
Currently,
do
the
that kind of
zoning is
density.
100,000 square feet a lot.
Right,
Yeah.
you would
If you
need a
wanna do
friendly
that, you're not
40B.
gonna get too much affordable housing.
Right,
Yeah.
it would have to be a 40B. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just out of curiosity, I know we went over them, but pages 2 and 3, are those examples of affordable housing
Yeah.
that were developed using LITEC?
yes.
Okay, great. So there's one on Cape, and there's one that's, about an hour and a half off Cape. But it does give some visual concept
A
as to what can be
two-story
achieved.
townhouse look.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we're not saying that's how we'd
Yeah,
want to
no. No, not
design
at
it.
all.
We're just
Right.
showing you an example. of
absolutely.
It's not, a brick tenement building, you can make them appear very nice. It would fit into the,
Yeah,
But
there's
we
been
want
some
the
nice
atrium and the skating rink to go with it, no question.
No, there's
about
been
it.
some nice buildings that we've seen put up, even on Nantucket. And, I went to a seminar one time where they showed two buildings, and you had to guess which one had 7 units and which had 2. And you couldn't tell the difference between the two. So that's the trick. If you do it right and make it aesthetically pleasing, there's a lot you can do with square footage if you do it right.
I agree.
You see, one of the things that we're trying to do is we get to a certain point. There's a lot of experts in town. Everybody has done this before, and everybody has an opinion. Some of them might not be as good as others. And so we really have to sort out the wheat from the chaff.
You said it already, if you have the means to finance your own affordable housing and not have to abide by the state or federal rules,
Right.
that's your solution. I don't need to be here to help you do that. You can do that yourself. I mean, if you have those resources to do it, a lot of towns don't, that would be one heck of an accomplishment.
It certainly takes a lot of effort, and we're in need of a housing coordinator, and we're in need of a town planner and a town engineer. If you got a little technical.
Little odds and
insights,
ends that
maybe
you
the
need to
appraiser
do.
and
I'll throw in
the
town surveyor
treasurer,
for
But
what it's
outside
worth.
of that, it's
Yeah,
right
we're
on the
gonna
brink, shall we say.
Now we're post-COVID now.
Well, if we had housing for them, right?
And
Amen to
when you
that.
purchase the debt at the end of the 13 or 10 years, is that something you can negotiate before, or you have to
Well,
wait until
we
that
know what the debt amortization
is
is.
going to be?
Right,
So-
it
We-
depends.
And
so
it will be that number.
We would try to set the purchase price to
Yeah.
pay off the debt, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And then, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, does the town have, I guess, could they become active partnership with the developer as far as the design and the materials and that sort of?
I
Or
would say,
are they,
I'd
is it a
say,
separate?
no, I'd say
type-
yes to an extent, right? It's a public-private partnership. I think you'd want the ability for a committee to be involved with the design concept as opposed to having to get
Then we get a
approvals
donkey.
every month, it
Right.
would be difficult, because this is a long process, right? To do the engineering, the design, architects, permitting, then we have to do the LITEC applications, there's gotta be at least 3 or 4 of them, those are every 6 months. And that's costly to do all that. the faster you can get through design, the better it's going to be. Because your application for the tax credits has to be fairly complete. So the state doesn't want a hypothetical, sketch of what you gotta do. They want architectural drawings. They wanna see our debt commitment. They wanna see who our tax credit investor is. So even though you might not get the tax credits the first time you apply, your project has to be fully baked with all the proponents attached to it. And you might get a pass the first time and wait another 6 months and apply again. So it's a long process. I think the hardest part's gotta be figuring out what you can do on the land,
Right.
figuring out the zoning, and then the design. I don't think, it's gotta have to fit into the neighborhood, so to speak. You're not gonna have a brick building, I would imagine. It'll probably be wood construction, right?
And it is a good program, there's no question, but you've got some competition when you go up to the Commonwealth, am I correct?
You do.
And sometimes it might be 2 or 3 years before you actually get
Right.
to the top of the list.
At least 2. The states, they've funded it pretty well now. So I think 18 months to 2 years. That's why in the second to last page, I put what their plan is. This application would score very high on compared to a application from another municipality, where there's not a lot of these projects on the Cape. There's just not.
Yeah, on a parcel that big, whatever, we talked about this before, whatever we do, it's not gonna happen overnight. It's gonna take years. It could
It's
take
gonna take years.
4, 5, 6, 7 years to do
But
something.
in terms of volume, you need a certain size to make it work. Is that 75 to 100 units, or 50 to 100, or?
I would
That
say,
magnitude?
I'd say 100 plus or minus.
What does that translate
You'd want some density,
to
right?
acreage?
But it ties up the property as well. It will
That's
tie
right.
up the property.
What does 100 units translate to acreage?
You can do 100 units in 1 acre.
Yeah.
It just depends on how you do them.
You gotta go vertical.
If you're on the waterfront in Boston, you can do it on half an acre.
That's right.
Just depends on how tall you want to go.
But, well, we have height restrictions even with 40B, no?
We would have a 40B that if you divide it out, just divide 14 by 100 and see what you get. 7 or 8 units an acre, but, don't forget parks and roads, a few little technical things. We might need some storm drainage and, maybe a community center.
Septic system.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
No,
septic
there's no
system will
septic.
take an
You're gonna-
acre and a half.
Ultimately, if you're gonna
That
take
is
7
true.
years, you're gonna be putting it into,
Yeah, you're losing an
the
acre.
sewer system.
And
Yeah.
is the sewer in close proximity to that site?
As one of your water and wastewater commissioners, I would say
Depends
no.
on how you build the sewer.
Yeah.
So I will be updating the Board of Selectmen this evening on proposed regulations coming down from Mass DEP on nitrogen attenuation, which we've been working on, but it's a game changer potentially for everyone in the Commonwealth that impacts upon a waterway that's impacted by nitrogen. So that's everybody on Cape Cod, South Shore, North Shore, for the most part. And that might change the equation as to how towns look at sewering versus where we are now to where we might be in 20 years. So that could change the equation greatly. At
But-
present, however, that end of Pleasant Lake, I do not believe is in the 40-year CWMP,
Right,
so it's
that's what I-
not,
That's
right?
what I thought.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so there's an acre and a half gone just with the septic
So
system.
That's gotta,
it's certainly
Roughly.
something
that's a challenge.
we should continue
Expensive.
and look at this as one of the options.
Oh, absolutely, and to the,
Yeah,
I'll use that as a segue to keep the agenda going.
Yeah.
And just say that when Mr. Burney reached out to me and he indicated he does, development projects and all that, I wanted to make sure that we, the town, were able to hear this informational presentation, because I didn't want these gentlemen to be excluded in any way from any future discussions, projects, or submittals. And so I appreciate you folks educating us, certainly me. And you did so, I would argue, without any harm to any future proposals that you may be a part of.
Sure.
So,
Great.
because if we're doing that, we're gonna be limited in how we're gonna get information, so. Any other questions for the gentleman?
No.
No.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you for your
Yeah,
time.
thank
Appreciate
you.
This
it.
was
Thank
good.
you very much.
You
It was
bet.
great.
So next on our agenda under new business is an old topic, but it's new because it's an actual proposal for the Harwich Affordable Housing Trust Action Plan as received from J.M. Gouldson. And again, a tip of the cap to Selectman Howell, who's not able to join us this afternoon. Jen Gouldson did respond to the Assistant Town Administrator's request for quotes.
You beat it out of her.
No, not at all. She sent it to the wrong email addresses. So first and foremost, I was able to validate that the town, through Selectman Howell, did receive this application and
Appropriate
proposal in
time.
time. Correct. So it is a timely response, even though it was misdirected and got held up in the ether regions or ether regions. Having said that, I wanted to put it on the agenda because I actually haven't had a chance to go through it myself, so I thought we could go through and see what Ms. Gouldson and her firm are suggesting they can do for us. So for the benefit of anyone watching in person or at home, J.M. Gouldson had previously been under contract to the Harwich Affordable Housing Trust, and specifically to try and create an action plan. She closes out her letter by indicating that they would be delighted to work with the project team and the Harwich community on this important planning effort, and to complete the work they started for the town before COVID-19 began. And really, that was one of the greatest impacts on them, as their contract was scheduled to end in the final quarter of fiscal year
21, 22.
1920, actually, I think.
20.
And COVID essentially destroyed their ability to do the outreach programs that they were hoping to do. So their proposal would allow us to enter into a contract. And you can see on page 3 that they talk about the time frame, that the scope of work would go from July of 2022, which is the opening month of fiscal year '23, and it would carry over to December of 2023, which is another fiscal year, so it'd be a multi-year effort. The funding is already there within the trust. And so, any comments or questions from the trust?
I mean, yeah, I did read through it, and they've done 60-plus already. They've done several on the Cape, I think one of them.
Sorry, you mean other housing
Other housing
plans and studies, correct, yep.
Yeah. So it really is not their first go at this, and they've done it all over the Commonwealth in many towns, pretty much, or in similar size to Harwich, and I think it's a good proposal. She did good work for us the last time, and I have very few questions, except when can she start?
Well, then the next step would be for the procurement office to draft a contract. If we agree to the scope of services, and again, for my purposes, the scope of services, I think, is pretty well laid out, and the related dollar amounts sort of comport with that.
And I would add to that, Mr. Chairman, that if my colleague and I can be of any assistance to them, we'll be delighted.
Sure, that's the good
Wherever we
news.
can.
That's the good news. The bad news is that we all need to be connected with them. I will tell you that they talk about a kickoff meeting via Zoom. I would understand that to be a product that means some remote online service, such as Zoom or GoToMeeting or something similar. So I can follow up on that one.
Good, we could meet with them we could meet here and do it on the screen, would that?
That's the thinking,
I
correct.
think that's great. Do we need to make a motion to approve?
No, because the RFQ comports with the town's requirements of the request for quotation, and it's well within the boundaries of the funds available through the trust. And so as Chief Procurement Officer, I would get a contract together under 30B, and as the Town Administrator and Chair of the trust, would be able to execute the contract with Jen and her team.
Great.
But really, just to let you know that We did get it, and we can resume this necessary, and I think it's gonna be a very positive and fruitful outcome.
Good.
Excellent.
All right. That's it for new business. The next would be any member updates. Under member updates.
Oh, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was just say, just from the Historic Commission, there is some housing going in on two of the buildings, I think 715, 721 Main. The owners there are looking to put a couple apartments in, so there's some movement there as
Oh,
some
above
housing.
the-
Yeah,
But
That's
the old
great.
tile company?
above the Christie's building. Actually, the tile company I heard, I'm not sure about that.
Sorry, which Main Street are we talking about? Right out here, or?
Yeah,
Okay,
on
thank,
Main Street.
thank you.
Not Old
Yep,
Main,
yeah.
not.
But there's 2 units potentially going above the Christie's building, which is just an open space without egress, so they're adding some egress and 2 units upstairs. And then the building that used to be the old dentist, I believe, post office.
Post office.
They're staying on the footprint with the loading dock and adding some apartments there and moving some of the storefronts around. So there's a couple of units coming up in the center, which I thought was exciting.
Absolutely, nice. Thank you. Larry, anything?
Do we have, this is a question, I don't know, do we have Tom Stello, is he available to do anything?
I don't know about availability as if he has
I mean,
bandwidth.
Can we, I mean, if we talk to him politely, can we hire him?
Sure, what would the particular be? Either just to keep his firm under contract?
I think that, yes.
So, remind me again, Tom is surveying, correct?
The surveyor.
So it'd be general surveying services for the trust?
Yes.
Okay. I can put something together on that.
And I think.
As you might know, surveying under the Chapter 30B is related to the architectural and engineering exemptions, so that's been understood to be something that we wouldn't have to do full-blown quotes or proposals. My only question on that from the trust would be the dollar limit you would want to put on that, and that's, usually I do that from a procurement standpoint of how much money do you think it's gonna cost us, that determines how we go out and procure it. I think more for us, it's how much do we wanna spend from the reserves that we have? And then last but not least, do we think Tom would agree
I
to
think
that?
initially my thought there is that there are a couple of properties that that would be wonderful if we could pick them up, and I understand some of the owners might be amiable to selling them, and we need surveys for that. He has the perimeter survey anyhow, it's just a matter of driving the pins in, so that's not a big deal. And ultimately, at some point in time in the not very distant future, we should physically see, I mean, just because the two of us occasionally draw lines out and see how much we can get on the land, doesn't mean that that's exactly gonna work. A surveyor does a lot more accurately rather than plus or minus numbers.
Sure,
that I work
absolutely.
with.
I can reach out to Tom if that's the
Yeah,
direction we wanna go and feel him out for his availability and get something together for sure.
good.
That's great.
Yeah, and, so that would move us on, to another step, I think, and, because we do have some funds available, and if we could add to the lands out there, that might be a worthwhile endeavor.
I have more update on that after my member update, but Judith, you're next
Oh,
for
I was
member
gonna
updates.
ask, are there any?
Oh, yeah,
updates?
absolutely.
Yeah.
By the way, because I know you're gonna ask me the question, Nan says we're gonna go to that meeting down at Witchmere Club, which is
Excellent,
separate.
okay. More alumni, there we go.
Alumni
Alumni.
meeting.
If I may, you're not talking the one in August.
Yes,
UMass Boston?
yes.
I'll be there myself. Look at this. 3 beacons in a row, and then the guy that went to Northeastern, is that?
Boston?
Undergrad, yeah, yeah.
I didn't know that, me
Cla-
too.
Class of 90, political science. Yep.
Ah, I was 87 political science.
All right, so we're there at the same time.
We
Yeah.
graduated with my wife.
I apologize, or I'm sorry.
She
I'm
got a
not-
master of education.
Very good, yeah. For what it's worth, political science with a minor in public administration. Oh, look, it worked. Judith, any member updates from you?
No, actually, nothing.
And then from me, first to tie it back to what Larry was talking about regarding survey work in and around Pleasant Lake Properties, AKA Marceline. I think, so we missed our May meeting out of respect to one of our colleagues. Prior to that, I think I would have been prepared to give you an update that a person who has indicated he's a representative of the, what may have been thought to be
Unknown.
owners unknown, he reached out to me first. I told him I could talk to anybody, but I can't commit to anything. And so the board has authorized the chairman of the Board of Selectmen to reach out to that person, because as you know, the town received funds at the October 21 special town meeting to do a taking by eminent domain. And there was some concern that it was gonna be an owners unknown effort. So if the owners are known, it becomes, I believe I wanna say simpler to do, but not easy, rather than easy to do, but not simple. So that is a matter that's now presently, with the Board of Selectmen. But perhaps, now that there are owners potentially known, we can, close that out very quickly.
That would be
So-
convenient.
That's
Yep, so here's
exciting.
hoping. And then the other one would be, I don't think, Larry, you and I think we would have been prepared to give a member update in our May meeting, but Larry and I met with representatives of the Cape and Islands Veterans Outreach Council, which, well, I thought was a great meeting. Larry knew half the room already, and in fact has been dinner companions with one of them, so we've got an in that regard. But one of the things we learned is it's a nonprofit advocacy group, so they are not representatives of the Veterans Administration or Veterans Affairs.
Oh, it's not the VA.
And so, no, but they are, you know, they're a
They've got
They're
an
a su-
umbrella
they're a support
organization.
Or they do work on behalf of.
correct.
Correct.
We would know their work, I think, most recently because what they were able to achieve in the town of Dennis, right near me, and so
Oh,
I'm in.
they did that.
I'm in
okay.
North Harwich, I think I'm supposed to call that West Dennis.
Cape Cod.
Yeah, if you head, thank you, Bill. See, again, I still don't get my compass right.
North Harwich.
Over by the Yarmouth side.
All right, thank you.
While you're at it, Bill, could you explain South Boston and East Boston to us?
Well, I believe,
Yeah, I used to go over the Mystic River Bridge to get to it.
I believe Everett. Yep, there's an Everett connection, so we can do that as well. But thank you to Bill Galvin on that, meaning if you're on Route something or other in Dennis, heading past the police station, with the police station on your left, and before you get to the new senior center for the town of Dennis, in that area, the Cape and Islands Veterans Outreach Council was able to work with the Town of Dennis Community Preservation Committee and establish what they refer to as transitional veteran housing. So in the meeting that Larry and I participated in, they would be very interested in the next step of housing for their clients, and that would be,
The transition and get the people that have that have come off the street.
go
See
to,
if we can do something for their families then.
yes.
It's kind of a step up.
The next step up.
So
yeah.
once you've been able to achieve housing, that the next step would be perhaps an individual place that supports a veteran that has a family and a veteran that's trying to get into the workforce. So it was a very high-level meeting. It was a great conversation. And although they are not the Veterans Administration, I said to my counterpart, Jim, at that organization, I think we can definitely come to bear with something that works for both parties and all of that for the benefit of our veterans.
And I think one of the good parts about it is, it's not like they're gonna put up what we envision veterans housing to be, post-World War II.
Correct, right.
It's not gonna be 500 brick units, all paved over. This is gonna be kind of a townhouse development that has 8 or 10 units.
Right.
Two-bedroom
That are
units.
transitional,
Yeah, something that
Family
supports
housing.
family.
Mhm.
Yep.
and they would be absolutely thrilled to do it, so, and further to that, if I could actually get a computer to work, I would sit down and complete the RFP. I mean, I've got the RFP, it's a matter of making it sound like it came from the town of Harwich.
Right.
So-
Jim shared
It's
that
not
with me as well,
plagiarism.
so,
It's
yep.
not plagiarism
Yep.
if you're paid for it.
Can I ask something?
Sure.
Since you're already doing an RFP? I would like that it would only be a ground lease. If I had my druthers, I would like this property to remain property of the town of Harwich in perpetuity.
That, I mean, the,
So were you talking?
Land.
Yes, the land,
all-
the
all
We're
land.
worried about the deed, you can
all-
always,
all of the-
would
all
a
of-
deed
of-
restriction would be the same.
Mount Pleasant Lake land,
Or the deed
Pleasant
restriction,
Lake.
yeah, I mean, just so that it remains,
It's always affordable housing, I got you.
yeah.
Is
Correct.
that the same difference? I mean, do we want to, we talked about.
Well, I
this
think first, if we're talking about the same thing, meaning the veterans outreach opportunity, excuse me,
And, anyone that comes in. front of us.
Anyone.
the
Yeah.
veterans would be agreeable to that as well.
Okay.
What they want is a model where they can go from transitional housing to perhaps, it might be single-family housing.
yeah.
For a veteran that has a family and/or is in the workforce. They then use that to be able to save up, and eventually they would be able to buy their own home, and then you keep using that transitional process.
Like the Marconi properties in Chatham. They have 3, I think, the town, of
Yeah, they did something interesting there.
Yeah.
It's a 5-year program.
half of the rent.
Whatever you pay, you get the half the rent back after 5 years to go purchase a home.
Correct,
So
yeah,
you're paying 2, yeah.
and it's
Yeah,
been very
they've got some
successful.
very creative ways to do it there, and I think, we envision veterans as being World War II or Korean veterans, no, not so.
Oh,
not so
on the
much
contrary, I
anymore.
work with vets all the time.
They're,
and
they're from Iraq and
Afghanistan,
Afghanistan, and
yes.
a lot of them aren't that old now.
I know, I'm the old lady in the room when I work for them, but I would like to help with the RFP. I don't want to just sit here and see the RFP and it's
Oh, I'd be
done.
delighted.
I would like to, I'm not part of any of these conversations, and I'd like to,
Sure, I can get you a copy of that, and
that would be great, because I am part of this trust, gentlemen.
No argument there. What I would say is, yes, we have the RFP that they used for the Dennis property, but before that was community preservation. So I think
That's
before-
all great, I'm just saying I'm feeling a
if
little
I may.
left out, that's
Yep.
all.
No, what I'm saying is before we even get to any of that, we would start the next conversation. And that would be community preservation applications if we wanted to go that route, that tie back to RFP and all of that. So even though we heard that, there's been no work done, and any impetus would come from this trust.
Okay, it's just, it's frustrating as a member of the trust to come to these meetings once a month and not be part of working towards things, that it's just,
Well, can we do a
I feel
subcommittee?
like
I'll
we're
get you
just
the
rubber
I'll
stamping.
get you the RFP,
Thank
one
you.
way or the other, and you can, we can sit down one afternoon, to your schedule, I've got a pretty, my schedule pretty flexible.
And I know we had talked previously, and I know we're in the summer now, of doing like public working sessions too. And how
Well,
to figure that out.
That was part of what
That's-
we needed James
With-
Poulson's
yeah.
help with, correct.
Yeah.
Our next meeting is Monday, July 25th at 1 PM.
Mhm.
Is there anything else to come back before us? Is there a motion to adjourn?
When were we going to move to, probably not in the summer, but the twice a month?
So we can have that discussion on the 25th if you want. I'm hoping
I
that
think we had
Mr. Howell
the
will be able to
discussion
join us.
the last time we met, didn't we vote for that?
I don't remember.
I don't remember that we voted to go twice weekly. I know we talked that we would bring it up
We
again
talked
at the town
about it.
meeting.
Talked about
Once we
putting
feel
it
the
on the
need, but we were
agenda.
waiting for the action plan and,
Right.
Yeah,
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
but then we're also gonna have some
And
public
before that, if I
forums.
may,
Yeah.
Yeah.
there are candidates
Including
being
the
interviewed
forum.
for the housing advocate.
Oh, yay.
Oh, nice.
We will no longer say coordinator, housing advocate position, so hopefully there'll be some movement on that, because we've had movement on several other positions.
That's great.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second, did you have a question, Brendan?
All in favor?
Aye.
And aye, 2 PM. Thank you, folks.